So you may hear some people coming in a bit late, but we don't want to make it too
Doesn't matter,
late.
it's precious time.
For those at home. Let me just briefly, I think we're still missing some of the participants. But
I'm sitting comfortably, so we're not in a hurry.
But I suppose we could start anyway, or at least I'll start with my presentation. Yes, there's more people coming in. We're almost there. We've come to the final session of the morning and of the week. Dario Compagno is already waiting for us. Dario Compagno from the University hello, of Paris Nanterre. He's associate professor at Nanterre. He's a semiotician. He works on developing a quantitative approach to the analysis of meaning. He has worked on Twitter and Reddit corpora, aiming to inductively identify communication strategies and pragmatic regularities. Dario co-directs the MA on Data and Society, forming communication experts with computational skills. He teaches courses about the role of algorithms in contemporary societies, scientific methodology, and data analysis. So we come back to the topic of social media, which was obviously so central to the whole week and to the interests of many people. Thank you very much for being with us, Dario, even if only digitally. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can you hear me well? I hope. Thanks a lot for this invitation. First, it's really a pleasure to share some time with you, however, digitally. And this talk will be kind of different from the preceding one, as that one you could see much better the human impact of the research. My talk would be much more methodological. We're going to talk about how to use some tools, as in my title, for the computational analysis of social media from a semiotic perspective. And I would like to start with a comment, a kind of statement about this last part of my title, a semiotic perspective. Why? What does it mean? Actually, let me see if I manage to switch the slide. I see there is a little bit of delay in what you see. So what are the digital humanities for me? This is a summer school in digital humanities, and I've got a very good definition, a very personal definition, which I believe captures the whole spirit of the movement. Digital humanities are the armed reincarnation of structuralism. In the 60s, people were starting talking seriously about culture as a scientific object, as something that we could study with formulas, in which we could isolate units, and we could do some kind of positivistic talk. And then after a few decades, this way of doing research faded out because some researchers thought that history was important, context, and for reasons I never understood. What happens today? That this is coming back, the idea of studying culture in an objective way, in a way that puts into parentheses history, context, and a lot of other stuff. We are doing it forcefully now, meaning that in the 60s, it was a fashion to be a structuralist, especially in Europe. We learned a lot about how to describe things. We were writing a book about how we would like to describe things. Now we are describing things with computers. We are describing culture with computers. And so when we talk about the digital humanities, I see two senses of the expression that are exchanged in the market of ideas. There is a weak sense. So when we do digital humanities, we mean that we are adopting computational tools for answering some questions appropriate to the human sciences, meaning that we do exactly what we were doing before, citing the same authors with the same general theoretical frameworks, but we put a little bit of images in it. So this is the weak sense, which is très à la mode, which is really fashionable today. But I believe that behind this weak sense, there is a core idea, a core movement that is not going to fade out, I hope, I believe also. So the strong sense of the expression digital humanities is that we are refounding the human sciences based on a strong epistemology that may either be quantitative or quali-quantitative, whatever that means. And the important words in these sentences I'm writing, you can read on the screen, is that we need something capable of producing predictive models, refutable theories, and technological implementations, which are three taboos for the real human scholars. Why? Because predicting history, predicting the future is considered to be something you cannot do, de facto, en fait. Refutable theories are something that since Dilthey, since hermeneutics, are thought not to pertain the human being, the human spirit. And third and foremost, I believe, the real taboo is that we do not love to think about social engineering. We believe that we write books and the evil guys in the government, in China, in Facebook, they are doing all the engineering of our interactions, of choosing what we see, what we read, but this is nothing of concern for us because we write nice books. No, I believe that science has to be intertwined strictly with the technological implementation, and our theoretical results must fuel and ground the technological shaping of culture in these years, because culture today cannot but pass through technology. And so we need to do statistics and computer science. Even if we didn't want to, there is a very good thing happening today, which is competition. The competition of computer sciences is forcing the human sciences to renovation by showing that some questions traditionally considered as soft can be quantified and become the ground of technological application. Let's take one very precise example, DeepL, the best automatic translator we have today, the first translator that really works. I put a little link there, a short URL, .at.ao, minuscule, small caps, CH, and then 6. And if you put this on your browser, I don't want to lose my slide, you can read an automatic translation of Chomsky, of a short passage of Chomsky in Italian or in any language you would like to read it in. And it will always be a very, very good translation. And how are they doing it? With deep learning. So no Chomsky, there is no syntax, there is no rule-based syntax. There is no semantics, meaning that, you know, Umberto Eco, this novel writer who also wrote a couple of interesting books about linguistics and semiotics, he said, you will never get to translate texts because of context, because of culture, because of a lot of variables that you cannot take into account computationally, but we have. So ex esse ad possem, given that we can, given that the thing exists, this means that we can do it. So we can translate human language to another language automatically. And if we can do this, we can do all the rest. I'm absolutely sure of it. And for example, we can study computationally the social media. This kind of new thing happening, putting together a lot of stuff, language, images, conspiracy theories and censorship, which are like the higher level of images and words, how you filter them, how you give a shape to the political and public discourse. And in my talk, one last word before going to the social media. I was forgetting this. So who can I cite that I believe is today the guru of the digital humanities as I like them, as I perform them, and I'm presenting my works to you so that you can learn a little bit of my mistakes, at least. So Franco Moretti, who just took his retraite, he's not working anymore, he's working, he's paid in a different way, but he was the head of the Stanford Literary Lab, the first lab in which we do literary history, actually, from a computational way. And I really suggest you to read these books and articles. If you haven't, I'd like to read just a small passage from Conjectures on World Literature. He published in the 2000, I mean 21 years ago. In this passage, he defines distant reading, possibly his most well-known concept. So this kind of opposite of close reading. Today we know that it's not so easy, but he presented this in a marketing way, so to arise attention. So the opposite of close reading, meaning that distance is a condition of knowledge. You can get to focus through units, textual units that are very small or very large, and not just the texts you manage to read. For example, I don't work on tweets. I work on items in tweets, and I look for trends in tweets. They're very small, they're very big. And if I read the bolded part, between the very small and the very large, the text itself disappears. Well, it is one of those cases when one can justifiably say less is more. If you talk to semioticians in Italy and in France, textual semiotics is the way to do the stuff. Meaning you take a text and you read it. No, the text has to disappear. Barthes said that the author had to disappear for the reader to have freedom of reading. Now it's the text that has to disappear for the human sciences to have freedom of work in the very small and in the very large. And the objection, a priori objections we may have, if you start to work on these things, at least fade out a little. If we want to understand the system in its entirety, we must accept losing something. We always pay a price for theoretical knowledge because reality is infinitely rich. Concepts are abstract, are poor, but it's precisely this poverty that makes it possible to handle concepts and therefore to know. This is why less is actually more. And in human sciences, they know this since a long time. We try to keep the most of soul in our work, but sometimes we have to get rid of something if we want to progress. So my talk will be about social media today, and I'm presenting two papers that I sent you. I hope that somebody could give just a glance at them. I will present them anyway in the grandi linee in general. So the first work is a work on social media as an object in itself, meaning that we care about Twitter, which is a strange sentence. There is much more interesting things than Twitter. Any kind of work of literature, it's more interesting. Still, we can treat Twitter as something that shapes current debate in society, so it deserves some media studies approach working on it. And the first thing you see when you start to work on Twitter, the first thing is where I find my data. But after you passed over this kind of, you stepped over or through this kind of technical step, then you begin to realize that you can work on tweets in a number of ways, in hundreds of ways. And you have to choose. And the ways in which you cut your object, les plans d'immanence, the immanence planes, you cut in order to describe it, well, it changes a little bit the object you're working on. And for example, in this work I'm presenting you today, it's a kind of old work, 5 years. We were working on all the tweets produced during the election, the campaign for the European elections in 2014 by French, British, and Italian candidates. We had also the Germans and the Spanish, but they didn't produce enough tweets, or at least we had problems collecting them. So this image, this first image I'm presenting you is just about the French candidates. How can we work on tweets? We can study the language, or I followed the ideas of some of my colleagues in an international group. We can try to see what people do with tweets, as Austin would have said, doing things with Twitter. So what do we do with tweets? We can use some operators, media logic operators. For example, we can retweet operators. We can retweet other tweets, or we can mention people that are going to receive a notification, blah, blah. We can hashtag some words, some keywords, so to structure the following of tweets. We can insert hyperlinks to newspapers, online newspapers and other stuff, and we can tweet to people directly. This is very rare. So first signature of the digital humanities, if I see them, it's images. graphics done by machines, by algorithms, like this one, visualizations. And already from an image like this, you can learn something. You need statistics, of course. You need to build up a little bit, muscle up the technical skills, but already from this, you can see that the distributions aren't at all the same. And so we've got a kind of symmetric, I wouldn't say normal mention operator distribution, meaning that one tweet every two has got an hashtag. We have got something that looks normal, but it's actually bimodal or even trimodal. And so here, the retweets, we would like to know more. And we have got some a little bit skewed distributions to the left to right here. This is to say that if we just do quantitative analysis and counting, how many tweets use mentions and retweets, we can get to something, but we don't like it in the humanities. What is this? I mean, okay, there are colors, it's very nice, but what can I get by studying these distributions? Very little. Is it the problem of statistics? No, it's my problem. Meaning that I have to do more meaningful representations. I have to find a way to move from the expression plane to the content plane, meaning that I have to do better statistics in order to represent a little bit the usage, the meaning in use of these operators. And one way you can do it, I tried to do it, was, for example, to build, look at the left part of this image, to build a multimodal and multivariate space of representation. Every little vector, every little black arrow there is the use of one operator, and it builds a kind of a very complex, very interesting space in which we can put each one of our candidates. Each candidate is defined by a number. And you see it in 2 dimensions, thanks to factorial analysis that allows to reduce the complexity of a dimensional space into a 2-dimensional picture. Don't get fooled. These kind of vectors, they're going in all directions. They are not even 3D, they are multi-D. And if we do this, we start to see, I believe, more interesting stuff. We start to see that there is a cluster, a huge assembramento of candidates all in the same place, but not exactly at the same place. And then we've got some weirder candidates going north, going east, and maybe we would like to know more. What do we do then? We read all the tweets of each candidate. I haven't read any tweets of these candidates. We asked the machine to produce a segmentation, a clusterization, the optimal, according to some mathematical principles, segmentation of the space in which these candidates have been put and situated. And the machine proposes us, it's never so automatic. The researcher has to do some work, but you can easily get from these candidates to 5 groups, to which I've given some names. You see participative on the bottom left, and then we've got an interactional tendency and an informative tendency. What's interesting in these clusters is not that I have chosen them con gusto. No, this is not the point. We are following some standardized procedures telling us that some candidates are closer to each other and different from the other ones. But I agree that if we look at a kind of diagram like this one, we would like to know more. Today, one of the main topics in machine learning is interpretability, meaning that we want to know what the machine did and why. And we would like, especially in science, to understand what is going on, not just the results, but the way in which we got to this result. And so what I did, what I tried to do, I tried to make a profiling of each cluster. Here, don't be fooled. They're not the same clusters. Here, I'm already showing something done with the British, French, and Italian candidates' tweets. So we've got much more data in 3 languages, no chance to analyze them linguistically because they're using different languages, but media logic operators are the same. So what do we see? That, for example, this first cluster that I called participative passive uses a lot of retweets. 60% of the tweets in this cluster use this operator. Then there is another group which uses a lot of hashtags, one tweet every 2, and one tweet every 4 has got retweets, and one tweet every 4 has got mentions. Why? Who did this? Dario, couldn't you just put all the retweets on one side and all the hashtags on the other? That's not the point. The point is that these clusters are empirically real. These candidates really tweet in the same way, and they do not just use hashtags. The candidates in the second cluster, they use a lot of hashtags, but also retweets and mentions. The candidates in the first one do not use a lot of hashtags. The candidates in the third cluster, they tweet directly to people, to some other candidates or to normal citizens. And they also retweet a little, and they don't use a lot of hashtags. And we could go on, meaning that we are using the machine to help us think what's going on Twitter. We are trusting the machine for doing the calculation, and we are trying to give a meaning, for example, names to the clusters ourselves. Roland Barthes said that nomination, the fact of giving a name to verbs, to passages in a novel, etc., is the first semiotic act, is the one in which we really, in this case, move from numbers to meaning, to sense, to words. And so, for example, I gave these names myself with a reason. I tried to understand what was going on here. The parasite ones are guys, mostly Movimento 5 Stelle, who were posting things on Facebook and just reposting them on Twitter without respecting its logics. So no hashtags, no retweets. They are very easy to isolate. And one can say, okay, this is already maybe something. I mean, in semiotics, we will be happy with the structure of classification of candidates. But in other disciplines, we could say, and what do you do with it? I mean, okay, you've got different Twitter styles. What can you do with it? I did 2 little steps. Let's see together what other steps could be done if I was better research and had more time. So first, we can try to get to a geographical or geometrical representation of the styles, the tweeting styles, and of the candidates in each party, trying to situate the parties. And we can start as human scientists to interpret very easily, in an easier way than statistical descriptions, what's going on. What do we see, for example, that in 2014, the new parties you keep in the United Kingdom and the Movimento 5 Stelle in Italy and the other ones, for example, the Debout la République in France, well, they were treating differently than all the other parties. They had a new communication way. And this may be important. At the bottom of this diagram, we can see the active participating and the passive participating. Passive because of retweets of others, active because of the use of hashtags. And we see that pretty much on the right, on the passive side, we have the French traditional parties, and the Italian ones are on the left. Because we Italians, we use a lot of hashtags. We try to direct discourse, and the French retweet each other's a lot more. So we can see a kind of normal participative use of Twitter, for example, there. The more you go up on the left, the more you see just Italian parties with declarative and parasite tweets, people who were just given an account the day before the campaign. On the right-hand side, you can see some other parties, and especially the British, who are much more balanced in their use of tweeting styles. So I'm a semiotician. I don't care at all about the substance of what I work on the political discourse, for example. I care about methods. But my colleagues working on the political discourse on Twitter, they found something. I mean, there is something to be said about the real object of what we're talking about here. That is differences in strategies between countries and between new parties and old parties, for example. And we could go a little bit more in detail. But let me show you another picture from the same data. What can we do? If it's true that a candidate may retweet or mention another candidate's tweets, well, then we can represent this kind of relationship between couples, pairs of candidates with a line, with an arc, and connect the candidates, represent them as dots, and connecting them into a graph. So each dot here is a candidate as big as the number of tweets she or he produced during the campaign, and the mentions and retweets are the lines connecting them. And this is another geometrical graphic representation of what was going on in 2004, in the 2004 campaign. So what do we see? That, of course, there are national borders on Twitter. Twitter is not the free internet of the founders. It's a national thing. And for example, the French here were very active. We can see that some parties were losing their head. UMP, they didn't know where to go. They're scattered. Other ones are much more concentrated. In Italy, Partito Democratico, perduto al battaglione, completely lost. And we have got some very important leaders in Lega Nord and in Fratelli d'Italia tweeting a lot, and the other candidates of their parties tweeting them in a kind of communication style we have developed in Italy before the war, so under some aspects. And what can we see? We can see the connections between some parts, for example, the Green Italia and Europe, environment. So the Greens in France, they're connected. But the most astonishing thing is that the only connection with Britain was done by the Eurosceptics. The UKIP were talking, were citing the Bout la République, and this is very sad. Now we know that the channel has been closed. We are now to go on our own, so let's try to build more connections in real Europe. But the prodromes, the symptoms of what would have happened were probably there already in 2014. So you see, as Franco Moretti said, you lose something. You lose all the deepness or the richness of the nuance, but what you get is a brighter depiction of the pertinent, the relevant relationships you are interested in, one step at a time. And nothing forbids you to build more representations and to enrich your data to say more. So, open questions and perspectives about this first paper. We started at 11, I think. So I'm already almost out of time. I will go quicker on the second part. So open question and perspectives. What would be nice to do? Causal analysis, which is very cool, very trending in the computer sciences today. Causal analysis means identifying relationship of cause and effect. For example, does tweeting style affect electoral performance? Did UKIP win because they were tweeting better? You know, for years, sociologists rendered their arms and said, we cannot say anything about causality in the social sciences. I don't know why. Now we are starting to do it again. And for example, if I had more time, honestly, which is the rare resource par excellence, I will try to understand if there is a relationship between how people tweet and the results they get, because this is what could help semiotic engineering, meaning to teach to people how to tweet better to win the elections. I heard, I was very pleased to hear yesterday, 2 days ago, Sven Salbrecht's work, in which he is working on causal analysis in a pedagogical context. So causal analysis is something that will go very, very far. It just started. This guy won the Nobel Prize for computer science, called the Turing Award. And this is the thing I'm working on now with all my energy, all the energy that I can. Another way we could do better analysis is what I did. Textual semiotic analysis. Let's go back to texts. Let's go back to tweets and read them. As Umberto Eco would have said, can we formalize and simulate a candidate's model reader? Can we write as Trump? This has already been done. We can do more scientific stuff, but pretty much it's a very good question. And I know that Leonardo Sanna, who is also there between Modena, he's working, for example, on these kind of questions. So trying to formalize computationally some question coming from critique, from semiotics, formalistic critique. A third way that I do not do is to do terrain, work field. meaning talking to people. In semiotics, you don't like to talk to people. The intention of the author is taboo. Still, if we wanted to do ethnographic data enrichment, like Clifford Geertz said, trying to get thick data, dense descriptions, of course we could do better work. I mean, we could, for example, characterize the relationships between candidates and produce richer clusters. I don't like anthropological work in itself, but if they bring data to me and I can put them inside here to make, for example, this diagram work better, I would be happy. Like, for example, to know here who is friend with whom, who went to school with whom, how come that these guys from UKIP were citing the Bulla République. All this is grasso che cola. It's something more that we can do, and it's honestly an open question for the digital humanities, how much I can put inside. In the second work I will present to you, did we really at 11? So I take just 5 minutes or maybe 10? Leonardo? It's okay? Is it a problem? Okay, so I will take just a few minutes to talk about the social media as a means for fundamental research, basic research. What do I mean by this? Not working on Twitter because we like Twitter, but using Twitter, or in this case, Reddit, to do linguistics, pragmatics, something that is much more interesting to me, for example. And in order to do this, what happens? That you need this kind of ethnographical, qualitative data enrichment. What we did was annotation. So you get people really reading and really annotating what they see in a text so that our data can get richer and we can work on diagrams that have more meaning, that manage to reach, we hope, the content plane of language and do not remain on the expression plane forever. What was our aim? I was working with Elena Ipure, a PhD doctor now in computer science in Paris, and she was interested in intention recognition, the fact of recognizing automatically the intentions in speech. And what did we do? We tried to see if we can find sequences of speech acts. For example, John Searle, you know, this very well-known philosopher of language, he said you can do a very limited number of things with words. You can do declarations, you can do assertions, you can ask things, so directives. You can express your feelings, so expressives, and you can take engagements, commissives. And John Searle said, you know, after my work, La fine della storia, Fukuyama, there is nothing more, the end of history. The most you can get by logical analysis is the one isolated speech act. But another scholar from Italy, Marina Sbisa, from Université di Trieste, she said, no, actually, you know, speech acts, they work together. You produce a speech act after the other. This context of speech acts in my talk and in the talk of others that I'm repeating, that I'm contributing to, they matter. And so we tried to see if we could find some sequences of speech acts in which speech acts take meaning. And we found something. Here you see the little green arrow is the beginning of a turn, the beginning of a person writing a post on Reddit. Reddit is a social media in which we exchange opinions. This was a subreddit about medical conseil, medical suggestions. And so the green arrow is the beginning of the turn. How do you begin a turn? Often, most often with assertives. You make an assertion. Quite often by expressing some feeling. Sometimes you move straight to a question. But do you see something interesting? I mean, when we saw this, we were very happy because commissives are never found at the beginning or at the end of turns. Commissives are necessarily embedded within sequences of other speech acts. The more so, they are necessarily embedded in assertives, not directives, not expressives. I do not take an engagement after a question or after expressing a feeling. I have to pass by an assertion. This thing, John Searle, he could have thought for years in his room, very hard, and he would have never found it out. because there is no logical reason why you cannot start a turn with a commissive, but there is an empirical reason. The truth, it's true. So it's there, you can see it. Now we can try to explain why, but it's a fact that we have visualized thanks to this diagram. Of course, if we use Searle's speech acts, they are not very fine-grained, so they are too little. What we did was 2 years of work in order to get to a family of speech acts, of 18 speech acts that were relevant for the analysis of conversations. Given that we weren't in a purely philosophical trend, we did a lot of psychological experimentation, comparing annotations, finding the best suited annotation, and then assuring ourselves that all the people doing annotation were understanding what they were doing by statistical validation of their annotation to see if they were annotating the same speech acts in the same places. And what did we get with our finer grained classification of speech acts? For example, that you do not express joy in the same way you express bad feelings, you express sadness. When you express rejoice, here, this speech act, it's at the beginning of the turn. And it's very often after a thank activity, at least in the corpus we get. Instead, a negative expression, the fact of expressing a negative, a non-positive feeling, it's found very much more likely at the end of the turn. And it's kind of embedded, or at least it follows or precedes assertives. So you see, if we just had expressives, we could say something. If we split expressives into positive and negative feelings, we can say something more, something else. And this for us was kind of proof that we can do conversational analysis in a computational way, computational pragmatics. And it's not true that the world ends at one speech act in isolation. And we can get to more stuff. One last slide, one last image. One interesting thing we found is a conversational preference, a conversational rule that says that direct follows complain, meaning that in conversations, first you complain, you express a negative feeling, and then you ask for something. Why? There is no logical reason. This is just pure empirical linguistics. You just don't do it. It will be agrammatical from a conversational perspective to put a direct before a complaint. And these two diagrams are the way by which we understood this preference. I send you to the paper for details, but you can see that complain and direct, we've got 14 cases in which it happens directly. When we were trying to visualize the opposite, you have to pass through assertives. You cannot move freely. These diagrams are not arbitrary. These reflect empirical reality of language in conversations in a way in which philosophy will never dream in its wildest nights. So just one last slide, open questions and perspectives about this more theoretical work. First thing we'd like to do, of course, there's no time, so just hopes. Experimental testing of rule breaking with native speakers. What does it mean? That is it true? The rules we found, are they true? It would be nice to put 10 English-speaking persons in front of us, give them grammatical and agrammatical sentences according to the rules we found, and to measure something, to see if they agree that the second ones are weirder than the first one. Second thing we could try to do, getting to more rules, finding more rules. It would be nice, we just found a very little. Third point, which is related to the other ones, generalization to the two other corpora, because we worked on one corpus, fairly medium in size, but one corpus. We spent a lot of time assuring that our work was normally representative. But when you work on other corpora, it's always best. It's always best. And for example, at this moment for another conference in a couple of weeks, I'm working on the death of Ivan Ilyich by Tolstoy, trying to understand if we can get to sequences of speech acts in a narrative text, meaning if there are rules of writing, pragmatic rules of writing that cannot be deduced by theory, but they have to be induced by the empirical analysis of a lot of speech acts, all the speech acts in the novel, and then trying to work them up with mathematics. I thank you very much. I hope that this talk can stimulate some discussion and give you some ideas about things not to do. I leave you plateau. If there are any questions, I don't know how it works. I mean, if you want to write them in the chat, I can read it. Otherwise, just I hear you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dario. Let's go with a real applause again, so we can experience some presence. So questions from the room, from Zoom? We have a microphone in the room, but unfortunately we cannot, unless the person who speaks comes here, we cannot display in the video because the camera is fixed.
Leonardo was asking me if this second work was published. Yes, it was published on Corpus Pragmatics, the second number of Corpus Pragmatics. I sent it to the PhD students. There was a shared folder.
So I might start with a question. Can you explain a little bit more in detail the labels of the diagrams and the numbers? Because I saw that some numbers in the arrows. What does those numbers represent? Are probability, occurrences?
No, these, okay, thank you very much for the question. So let's take, they're all the same. So we can take the easier one. These are just the number of turns in which this kind of sequence appears. So for example, in 168 cases in our corpus, the turn was started with an assertive. So they're not probabilities, they're just raw weights. But you know, this software and this algorithm called process mining does a good job in simplifying visualization, in the building, for example, some arrows or taking them out according to some probabilistic weights. But what you see here is just the final result, and these are just raw numbers. We could have put probabilities, but you see probabilities of what? Probabilities of starting a turn, for example, with this here. Which kind of probability could we put? That an assertive follows a directive compared to what? Compared to the reverse, or compared to an assertive following an expressive. So the raw numbers here appear to be the best choice to give kind of a general perspective on our findings.
I was wondering if you could tell us more about the work in progress of the Tolstoy novel and about the choice. Why did you choose that novel and how it differs from work on blogs and social media? And if
what can I show you? Yeah.
If translation has
Thank you very much. I will respond. The answer will be a little bit anecdotic, meaning that it's a novel that I chose to work on with UHSS students in Paris on a quantitative semiotics course. So I chose this novel and we worked on it in French translation. This was not very well received by the other person I did the workshop with, but for the kind of analysis I was aiming to, language wasn't so pertinent because I believe that a good translation should preserve speech acts. If there is a question in Russian, there should be a question in French too, there, at the same point. I trust translators. I mean, when you work on translation, in translation, it means that you accept the idea that the translator is doing a good job and that you cannot know all the languages in the world. I know that next year I will be forced to work on a French, not forced, sorry. I've been suggested to work on a French work of literature because of there is translation. It's something we don't do when we do these kind of studies. I don't agree. But I chose this novel because of content reason. I mean, if you read it, it's an amazing, amazing short novel that we could work with students quickly, and which is a récit amoral, meaning that it has a moral. There is this guy, something happens, the novel ends, and everything has got a very structural meaning. what happens in the end, gives a meaning to what happened before, and everything falls into pieces at the end very, very smoothly. So it's kind of an opportunistic choice, because the other analysis we were doing with students regarded this kind of structural meaning of a novel and how we can represent it with quantitative means. But now I'm working on the same text. I hoped that the students will do annotation for me. They didn't. So I will have to do it by myself this weekend. And what I like of Tolstoy, many things. I mean, I am not an expert in Russian literature, so it's just that it's very easy to understand. There is no indirect postmodern talk. It's very, you've got speech acts, so it's very, it should be very easy to annotate and then to produce sequences. Of course, you realize this is just one work of fiction. So generalization is at most a dream, but we have to start from something. And this brings me to this fact that you need manual annotation when you want to do some kind of content-oriented analysis. You need to pass by some manual annotation. What we did with Elena Epure, a second publication, which she was first author, and she did an amazing job, was to take our annotation of a small corpus and automatically enrich a much larger group of data. This is called machine learning, supervised machine learning. So we hope, I mean, that if we had enough annotation, then we can move farther in a quicker way. But at the beginning, you really need manual annotation. I hope I answered the question. It was kind of, my answer was a little bit anecdotal. No reaction. I killed you all.
I was muted, I think. So more questions. I was saying more questions there. Thank you, Dario. The answering was satisfying for the.
Hi. I have a question. I'm very new at this. So maybe it's a stupid question. I don't know.
There is no stupid question.
Regards to Reddit, we can consider the annotators of Reddit, the users of Reddit, representative of the population, the way we communicate, because the users of social media are a little part of population. So I don't know if there's a sense.
You used a magical word, representative, which is defined, is the magical word of statistics. How can we say that if I work on 10 people, I can predict how the entire nation will vote? The point is that this has to be representative. From a statistical perspective, our work is not representative of the entire use of language, because we used online conversations in a very specific medium and in a very strict context. Is there any magical representative way of using language? If we worked on real conversations, oral conversations, would we get better results, more representative results? I'm not sure. We will get results that represent something else. I agree that we try to analyze with the same methodology, with the same aim, more stuff. But I don't believe, honestly, that the fact of using Reddit is bad. I mean, it's conversation, it's language. It's language performed by some very specific means. And so from there, we'd like to move further. For example, Tolstoy's novel is not at all the same. And the most natural, probably, kind of pragmatic situation is oral discourse, oral talk, oral debate. That would be interesting too. It's just, I believe, a matter of multiplying stuff. But personally, I don't believe that the way it's wrong. I mean, we started from there. You can start from somewhere else, but you have to move forward. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, thank you.
We have one more question from the room, so please.
Hi. I had two questions. One regarding the Twitter. I was wondering if you have considered for the ethnographic expansion, if you had considered just using the semantic web, because it seems like that would be probably a quite, I wouldn't say easy, but straightforward task to, you know, if these are candidates that, for example, have their Wikipedia pages, you can really leverage the semantic web to see who went to school in the same amount of time in the same town. So that was just one thought, because you could probably leverage a lot of interesting information that you wouldn't even consider if you're talking to a normal person that doesn't have such a wide breadth of knowledge. And the second one, following up on what Chiara said, I was wondering if you have thought of how to deal with the fact that on Reddit, there's many agents speaking. So it's dialectic, but it's also not a two-way thing. And something like literature, you know, you might have dialogues embedded, but I mean, I'm not sure. I haven't read the specific work that you will be working on, but I would assume that it's not a complete dialogue between two people. So how you're thinking, if you think it could be useful to try to tag in these analyses, how many speakers there are, what is the order of the speakers, those kinds of questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting questions. So for the first part, I totally agree that the most we can use data that already exist, the better. So using the semantic web to do enrichment is something that it's very standard procedure. I mean, you can, if you manage to, for example, in this case, candidates, as you said, must have a Wikipedia page with their parties, their age, for example. We could weight a little bit the arrows with the age or the genre, gender of the candidate. That could be done very easily, I believe. Allow me to rebound on your question. A real anthropologist will say, this is not enough. This is never enough. You have to go places. You have to see people, shake hands. If you don't shake hands, if you don't sweat, there is no qualitative work. I go in your perspective. I mean, I believe that no, you get qualitative information even online, even in tweets. It's just a matter of how you deal with it, which kind of questions you ask to data. But just take into considerations that a lot of anthropological qualitative work is based on the idea that all in the internet is wrong. You have to go and talk to people. So as a middle way, I will say that it could be anyway useful to have an expert in the field in order to enrich the data with the conscience. For example, I had no idea of the political logics in France, Italy, or United Kingdom. So if I did automatic annotation starting from Wikipedia, I would risk to lose some bits of information. If an expert person was doing it, it would be much better. Consider that this is one of the demands of today's data analysis. What is asked to people is to know math, statistics, and to know your object. A data journalist has to know the thing he's working or she's working on. And so your question allows me to say just this. Yes, of course, you can use surrogates of qualitative information found in the web, but it's true that some people believe that the more qualitative you get, the better your data enrichment will be. Second question was about dialogues compared to narration, if I can reformulate like this, meaning that in Reddit, we were talking about conversation. Our work is on conversation. So you've got a people answering to the other, and we wanted to see in each turn how things worked on. We couldn't do interturn for technical reasons. In Tolstoy novel, I'm more interested in the voice of the narrator. I'm not sure it's a good expression, but in speech acts, independently of the fact that they are found in dialogues or in narration, in the third person description of the narrative work. For example, one thing that I should try to do is to differentiate the two, to see if there are some regularities in narration and some regularities in dialogue. Because already if you manage to have variables, so separations, differentiations, in your data, it's very good. It's easier to find differences on the left and on the right. I try to rebound also on your question, on your second question, is narrative dialogue real dialogue? So semioticians would say there is no real dialogue, there is just different kinds of dialogue. But it's true that instead analytic philosophers like Searle will say that in novels you don't find real speech. In the logical status of narrative fiction, Searle stated very clearly that dialogue in novels is fake dialogue. And Derrida said, absolutely not, it's real dialogue, it's the real dialogue which is fiction. And there is a big debate there. But it's interesting. It's interesting to see, it would be interesting to see, from a quantitative perspective, of course, if the dialogue in fiction is different from dialogue in real life, oral dialogue, because of pragmatic regularities, because that will be super useful. Also, for example, to detect fictional talk. I mean, if a person is inventing a dialogue, maybe he or she doesn't know, doesn't realize, but she's not following the correct real world sequence of speech acts, which is grammatical, which is attended by the speakers here. So, thank you. This direction is also, I always find dozens of open possibilities of research, but you will see at the end of your PhD that time is really a bad maître. I hope I answered you to your questions.
She said yes. So, more questions? On Zoom, from the room. Oh, Nicola, please.
Yes, perfect. So first of all, thank you for the presentation. Before the session, I thought to be a constructivist, but finally I became a structuralist probably. But what I want to say is that I was interested about, because it's also related with my research work, the way in which in the theoretical framework of that you use, the meaning of mentions, hashtags, and hyperlinks. So in the theoretical framework that you use, which are the meanings of this kind of instruments?
Tricky question. What is a meaning of a national?
What they indicate?
Okay, maybe let me answer in a certain way. Let's see if this answers to your question. We do not use mentions in the same way. So, for example, some people mention another person because they like her or him. Some people use mentions to stimulate in an aggressive way. Imagine I do not like some politician and they say, governo ladro, it's the fault of Nanterre, of somebody. So it's true. And we worked on this with some more qualitativist people in the team. Still, is it a problem? So let's say that mention operators, retweets operators, hashtag operators have got different meanings, that you say, so different uses, different ways, practices in which we use the same operator. This was one of the points of using this kind of approach, because we made abstraction of it. We said we cannot read all the tweets. We don't care if people understand that they are using all hashtags, even if these hashtags have got different uses, different ends. What we care about is that they are using hashtags. So we try to get to a more abstract level, losing absolutely the richness in the variety of uses of hashtags. How can we put it back? So the question, as I see it, is like, okay, let's do another few months of work. How can we separate and differentiate people using mentions to insult and people using mentions to approve? Well, how do you do this computationally? You do some annotation, as I did in the second work, meaning that you read a few tweets, you try to isolate 2 or 3 ways in which hashtags are used, then you start to annotate, you differentiate the first tweets. If you're good at computer science, you can do machine learning annotation, meaning that you start from a little number of tweets and then you tag all the others in a pretty solid way, like 90% or 99% of feasibility and of confidence, sorry. And so, as I see your question is like, there are different potential uses in each of these operators. So I don't care about the general use. No, I don't agree if we put it this way. I think that it is interesting, but it will be more interesting if we could differentiate the uses. Let me show you this weird retweet distribution. It's almost symmetrical, but it's trimodal. You see, there are some candidates that never retweet. It's the first peak. Then you've got a main family. And here you've got a first mode and a peak and a second mode or peak. These 2 modes, every time in statistics, you've got a bimodal distribution, there's something hidden behind it. There is a latent variable, a latent reason, making that these are 2 distributions, even if you don't see it. For example, banally, it can be women and men. Men retweet more, women retweet less, or the opposite. What is it? What's much more reasonable than gender here? Different uses. Probably this peak of people, the lower peak, use retweets with a different idea in their minds than this second peak of tweets. So here I see a sign of more work to come, a sign that I do not see in mentions. So if you ask me, from where do we start to do annotation? We annotate retweets. That's useful. We do not annotate mentions because the average use of mentions, it's 1, it's the same. People do pretty much all the same things with mentions. How do I see it statistically? I'm going, of course, in a kind of brutal way because here there is a little mode, but here there is no mode. It's very interesting. No second mode. So annotation takes a lot of time, research time. So it will be better to start with some ideas in mind. And if you ask me from where to start to differentiate the use of operators, I would start from retweets because of this reason. I hope I answered to your question, Alex.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, because it's really related with my research work, because I'm analyzing a far-right party in Spain, Vox, and I would like to apply this structuralist approach also because in the next weeks I will speak with the staff of the communication staff of the party, and I would like to make a sort of ethnographic comparison between what I can see from data and what they could say to me about their strategy. And combining this kind of 2 different approach, I don't know if it could be, if I could find something that qualify the data I found in a certain way.
Very interesting example. Don't get astray. Don't get fooled by what they say, because usually the author of something has no clue of what she's doing. But it's true that from talking to them, you can get some ideas. You can, I will suggest you, we are talking about PhD students, so allow me to suggest you some talk with that ethnographer before going there, trying to get some clues of what to record everything, but even the way you ask questions has to be a little bit thought à l'avance. There are some ethnologists, especially in France, that say, no structure. I go there I just drink coffee with people. You can do this too. Which kind of data do you have? On the other hand, not the interviews, but
I have all the political discourse text on Facebook, and the number of likes, the number of visualization of video, the different kind of content they publish in 2 years. So it's a really great corpus, differentiated by the kind of content. So videos, text, images, and the frequency of their all the statistic data referred to the statistical period of their production and published.
Well, then if you already started to work on them, maybe you can get some clues in the data of things that you would like to enrich, you would like to improve, and then talk to them. Do not expect that they will tell you something about each speech. So the things you can get ethnographically, usually it's broad, unless you've got a very clear idea in your mind. With just some interviews, you can just ask very broad questions. So it's hard to connect them with data. If you have got some hypotheses already on how they talk, maybe you can do some tricky questions. Like don't ask them directly what you want to know. Do like psychologists to ask another thing, and then try to get what you want to. If you want to know if they believe that Franco was a great leader, don't ask it. Just try to put it differently.
Yes, thank you, thank you.
It's a very...
Thank you, Dario. Any more questions so far?
Which kind of tools are you using, Nicola, to work on your data?
CrowdAngle.
Hmm?
CrowdAngle. It's a software for the analysis of Facebook and Instagram, and it's really useful because I can extract all the lots of interesting all the data of all the all the posts, and in a particular range of time, and yeah, there are lots of graphics that the same software allow me to find. So it's really useful.
If you have plain text, maybe you can also use Tech or some kind of software for lexical analysis.
Yeah, I'm using Sketch Engine for it.
We still have 10 more minutes, I think, according to our time plan. So if you have any more questions, I see that the microphone is being sanitized.
Well, perhaps you've partially answered the question I had in mind, but perhaps you can deal a bit more with the issue of annotation that you've mentioned, because you've given us a lot of results in terms of, for example, sequences, etc. But how do you go about the annotation? What is your experience? How did you, perhaps you can give a little bit of advice on that too.
Thank you very much. This was the hard part of the work, as you can imagine. And I'm not joking when I said it took us 2 years to do annotation. So how is a kind of how is annotation done in the way we did this? And how, for example, I will do Tolstoy's novel in a very different way, because when I will annotate next weekend Tolstoy novel, I will just rely on my linguistic feeling. meaning that I will write down, this is a question, this is an assertion, this is an indirect speech act, and all these things. So this kind of annotation is very, very qualitative in the bad sense. It relies on my intuition, almost an anthropological intuition. What we did was more on the side of psychological annotation. So we don't trust anyone, we don't trust ourselves. We put 12 annotators of different backgrounds, trying to balance gender, age, blah, blah, blah. And we make 12 different annotations of the speech acts, not of each one. We used 3 annotators per speech act because we wanted to annotate a large corpus. And then we measured the agreement of these people. Let me, please, I didn't think about showing you the technical detail, but we've got 2 minutes. So the agreement means that if I said that this is a question, you see, expert. This is already the aggregated data. But for example, if somebody said that a certain sentence was an assertion and the other said that it wasn't, etc., we wanted to really calculate the goodness of it, the correctness of our annotation. What does this do to research? A lot of work, but also great feedback, meaning that the final classification of speech acts we used for doing analysis wasn't at all the first. We started with some ideas, with some speech acts, starting from Searle and Verschuren. I think it was called Verschuren. So some kind of existing annotations, possible annotations of speech acts. We did the first experiment. We found out where people were not agreeing on, where people were agreeing on, and then we built a better annotation. 3 rounds, I think we did. And in the end, there was still a lot of disagreement in some categories, but this gives us much more confidence in the fact that our results are valid, meaning that if a lot of people believe that this is a question and this is an assertion, then most probably this is kind of true. It depends a lot on the instructions you give to people about what is a question and what is an assertion. We spent a lot of time, for example, elaborating the instructions for the annotators. This is something also that it was the first time I was doing something like this, and you learn a lot. You learn that the way in which you explain to people what speech acts are impacts hugely what they will produce. And so we worked on the formulation of our demands. This, I think, was what we gave them in the end. So what are assertives? You can assert something, plain statement, and the examples. Because if you don't give people examples, how can they annotate? Sustain was something like when you really believe in what you're saying. Guess is when you don't believe a lot in what you say. Agree on disagree, it's easier to understand. And still, here we had a lot of disagreement, meaning that these 2 classes that we worked a lot trying to make them work, they didn't work so well. Our annotators didn't agree on what was an agreement and what was a disagreement with the preceding speech act, with the preceding speech act in the sequence. So, for example, this we don't know why. If we could redo the experiment, we will work on these 2 categories. The other ones worked. The amount of work needed for this kind of work, it's unbelievably more than what I used to do in qualitative semiotics, meaning that normal semiotics, I read, I make myself some ideas, and there is no validation. I go to the conference and I talk. Instead, here, there is a lot of validation by myself. I mean, I try to get ways to prove me wrong and to improve what I'm doing. And this changes the cards on the table. It's a different game. In terms of details, so I told you about the instructions. I told you about the fact that there were several people. And for example, luckily, my co-author was a computer scientist very well trained in statistics, so she found a particular measurement called kappa, Fleiss kappa, to measure agreement and disagreement in the annotation of multi-label annotation. So something very precise. We used it. She implemented it in Python, and it worked. Just one comment. It's very important to work with computer scientists somehow, statisticians, and to build interdisciplinary groups, because we don't have nobody's got all the competences needed for this kind of studies. So it's very nice also to talk with people that have got a different background. I like this a lot, at least personally. And you can manage to learn new stuff on the way. And it's not true that you can never learn statistics if you have got an MA in literature. You just start. And little by little, you will get to something, I believe.
Thank you, Dario. Very clarifying. Any more questions? Last questions before closing remarks?
Hi. I just have a question, Dr. Dario. Perhaps a clarification. I'm not too sure, but when you said that you and your other researcher found 18 speech acts with regard to the Reddit, and you also said that you're analyzing Leo Tolstoy's work. Is it using the same speech acts, or are you using something else? Are you dealing with something similar? Or
can you repeat the second part of your question, please? So we found
when you found
18 speech acts.
Speech acts. So
yeah,
that was for Reddit. And when now that you've started analyzing Tolstoy work, maybe this is just a clarification. Are you still working on speech acts, and are you using the same 18 speech acts that you found for Reddit and applying it to Tolstoy's work, or are you starting from scratch?
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I'm using exactly the same typology, which was thought by design to be general. This is why we spend so much time doing it, meaning that it's not something good just for Reddit. It should be in our ideas and good for any kind of conversation. I mean, we try to make an ad hoc classification. Of course, we saw what other people did in this field, and this should be good to analyze conversations. Why? For example, you see here we've got accept and refuse. You accept or refuse something that was said before. You agree or disagree on something that was said before. So we try to make an annotation that works for conversations. I'm going to use exactly the same because the amount of work needed to did this is not reproducible. I cannot do it again. So I believe that there will be things in Tolstoy's novel which are completely different from this, but I will still go for this. Also because you see, it's compatible, the classification we developed, it's compatible with Searle's 5 classes. So at least, even if we had some doubts on these kind of smaller classes, I can always go back to Searle's 5 classes and do an analysis that can be understood by anyone. But the 5 classes of Searle are not detailed enough. So I will try to use my classification, our classification, and also for Tolstoy, and let's see what happens. Thanks for the question.
Okay, right.
Very practical.
Any other questions so far? The room is really silent. Zoom.
I think it's food time.
Yeah.
I know we've got the plenary discussion.
Yes, we still have a small discussion, a wrap up, let's say, on the summer school. and then we have the lunch.
The best part.
Yeah.
Of course, always. Especially initially.
So.
Well, perhaps I'll just add one more question to this one and then open the general debate. My question was actually related to something that has already come up. Maybe I'll come up myself.
Yeah.
And that is, how do you go about the non-linearity of some dialogues in conversation? Do you have any measure of that? Because you may agree or disagree with a term that's not exactly right before yours. It could be, you could be disagreeing or agreeing with something that's way behind. I mean.
Thank you. Especially online, what we found out, and it was obvious, is that online you've got a lot of problems of tracing the flux, the thread of conversation, precisely. That's why actually we worked on intra-turn sequences for the moment, meaning that we are analyzing one post at a time, the sequence within one post. And the limitation we had in this study was exactly the one you were pointing out, meaning that we couldn't trace exactly who was answering whom. In real dialogue, oral dialogue, this shouldn't be an issue at all, because in oral dialogue, in presenza, usually it's clear to what you are agreeing, disagreeing on, or answering to. So this is a real limitation of the work we did. We wrote it very clearly. It's intra-turn sequences, and there is no way actually that we found to ovviare, to make this problem go away, because of the structure of Reddit that allows for a tree of threads. So you do not, as you said, there is non-linearity, so you do not answer to exactly the preceding one, not always. But we had some information anyway, built in some threads, because you reply to a certain comment. So somehow we could have traced a little bit the structure of the conversation, but it was going sideways. It was opening trees. And from a statistical perspective, we didn't know how to deal with this problem of non-linearity. I repeat, in other contexts, novels or natural oral speech, this shouldn't be a limitation. At least we don't believe this should be a limitation.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments on this specific talk then?
I might have one more question that is not specifically related to the research, but to digital humanities in general. I know that Dario has a professional background outside the academia, and also Professor Essarioli before said that, of course, PhD students have to start thinking about the future in academia, research in general. So in general, planning how to pursue their career in research, but it might also happen that you can find a way to pursue your career in the research. So what do you think are the most required skills for a digital humanist outside the academia, since you were outside the academia?
I were outside the academia before learning these things, and I learned them doing marketing, meaning that I was starting by doing normal semiotics, and a colleague of mine, Stefania Gogna from Milan, she told me, Dario, there is this kind of software. You ever heard of it? No, never. It's useful. And so I started to analyze marketing data, online data with quantitative tools. So for me, it's kind of obvious that this kind of ability to work on data quantitatively, it's a very good tool for working to some businesses at least. So social media, there is people spending money on social media, like businesses. And so if you can manage, and qualitative studies aren't really enough, I think, today to get you a job. It may be, if you're a good writer, you can be the ghost writer of somebody. But if you want to analyze stuff, I think that some quantitative tools today are needed. But it's a very broad question because you know, if we knew that, if we had the graal of making our students get a real secure job in the market, for sure, everyone will do it. So for the moment, our scommessa, our bet. Thank you very much. Our bet in Nanterre, in this master I'm working in, is that to take communication students and feed them computer science and statistics until it comes out of their ears. And then we will see what happens in the job market. It's a kind of brutal strategy, but we are pushing this through, and the master just started. For PhDs, even more. I believe that if you say to somebody, I'm a doctor, PhD, I don't know any statistics, in some fields, it can appear a little bit weird, especially in a field like marketing, in which there are a lot of psychologists who know their statistics, unless they just studied Lacan and Freud. But some quantitative competences may help to get into the job market I know about, which is marketing. I know a little bit about it, not a lot. Maybe this question may be answered by other people.
Okay. Any more questions or comments? Or maybe this was already a relatively general point, which could get us started on our final discussion. And we thank you very much again, Dario.
Thank you very much.
And perhaps open this final moment right before lunch for everyone. And let's say I'd like to use the little time that's left, because we've got about half an hour, both to sort of carry on discussions, debates that you may still feel are open, debates over the whole week, but also very much to get feedback from the students on what has been particularly relevant to them, or on what perhaps what they've learned, what they have thought about their own work. Sometimes I'm tempted to say that for a real feedback, one should ask, well, obviously, one should ask both what you've liked and what you haven't liked, what you have thought was interesting and should perhaps be an important element of future summer schools, and what you would change. But a lot of people don't feel particularly happy to discuss these things in public. Things like, this is what I really didn't like. Feel free to do it in this final discussion, but otherwise feel free to email me. You'll be doing me personally a favor. If you tell me what you thought was successful, what you thought was not successful, what you would keep for future editions, and what you would leave out for future editions. I do hope future editions may be in person, because personally, as I've often said, I've certainly missed what I think is a very important element of summer schools, the sometimes almost obsessive sharing a week. Sharing coffee time, sharing lunch breaks, sharing the evenings, etc. To some people may even be a bit claustrophobic. For example, in the past, I used to have sort of intensive sessions of a research group in a monastery. And some people thought that that was a little bit too much for them. I thought, no, I quite like the atmosphere. Then it's good to part at some point and say, bye, see you next year. But certainly the sharing many things helps the conversation, helps getting to know people. So I doubt that I would like to keep this format in terms of being in presence or being online for future editions, but certainly it's also true that being online gives you possibilities that being in person doesn't give you. That perhaps even with cursory participation, sometimes we've been able to reach more people. But let's say I'm thinking more of feedback in terms of what we've been doing, the program that we've chosen. The program that we have chosen mixed many different keywords. It's in itself the title with its many, many names tells you that we were trying to squeeze many things into it. It was, just to remind you, it was digital humanities and digital communication, multimodality and transmediality. That's because we probably start with topics that are in themselves combinations of elements. I'm aware that digital is an adjective, but it certainly reminds you of a combination between humanities, which is in itself a term that covers quite a large area of knowledge, and the notion of digital computers, and even the combination of digital humanities, of course, means many different things. We've seen two different combinations even this morning, where, for example, the emphasis has been more on what the digital can do to a humanities project, to get it better known, to keep the group together in with the migration projects. For example, the digital component actually illustrates the many different interpretations possible, because we start with a project that has a digital archive in mind, but that also has digital communication in itself, and it's digital communication in terms of group creation, holding an international research group together and getting the content known. But similarly, in the second talk this morning, I won't do this for all the talks, don't worry. I'm only just giving you time to think about what you liked most and what you liked least. But the second talk was, let's say, I announced it as we're going to talk about social media. So it seemed to be more on the digital communication side of our first two keywords, but it certainly showed how the digital can actually be a tool for analysis, because that's exactly the variety of approaches that we've had in mind right from the beginning when talking about digital humanities and digital communication. The idea that the digital can be to the humanities a tool for research, a tool for communication, an object of study in itself. So we already had many different combinations in the first part of the title, and we certainly also had different combinations open in the second part of the title with the multimodality and the transmediality. Perhaps in a way the multimodality has been a bit more central than transmediality. Perhaps because it's supposed to be more methodologically relevant to everyone, and then most people have actually chosen the multimodality topic, but transmediality has been more in the background of many of the projects. Certainly is probably there whenever there's an element of digital archives or when there's an element of digital publishing, so that I go back to other things that we've done, or perhaps to the beginning. Like, for example, certainly Massimo Riva's presentation, Massimo Riva's session was very much about multimodal strategies, but it also illustrated ways in which digital monographs can also be the turning point of a lot of transmediality, because they link, they connect, they create networks with resources and elements of any kind. We've been through many different areas. Sometimes you might even think not always terribly coherent, but I think in a way it's a bit the humanities problem. It's such a complexity that we always tend to tackle it from one of the corners of complexity, and we can hardly ever talk about the humanities in general. It may be something that I experience quite strongly, quite deeply in our PhD program, because we have a PhD program in human sciences in general. So technically speaking, in terms of disciplines, we could say we have history, philosophy, psychology, education sciences, linguistics, literary studies, and I've probably forgotten something else. We've got so many different things. Each of us tends to start from one little corner of our own disciplines. But I think the, having a common framework for our PhD in humanities is extremely helpful in reminding us of an issue that we've certainly debated intensely this morning: the need to have so many different competencies and so many different points of view when you want to tackle a problem. Tackling a problem is not tackling a problem that belongs to one discipline. It's tackling a problem. And then you need to look for the resources that may help you, and you often find them in different disciplines, in different contributions. We've seen, for example, how, again, the very specific problem, to remind us of our first day, of publishing a dictionary online, an historical dictionary like the one that Jeffrey Williams was talking about, requires competencies from so many different fields: history, geography, linguistics, technology, etc. We've certainly seen how multimodality, and that was multimodality rather than nothing to do with transmediality, can help you present your own data. We've seen Corsini's presentation, for example. Sometimes I think this should be a larger component in the growth of a PhD student or a young researcher, because it's so important to be able to present your own data in ways that are visually accurate and visually effective and efficient. There's been a number, so Corsini's talk, for example, addressed you directly as young researchers in terms of there's a whole range of things that we can do. A couple of sessions were directly devoted to social media. We asked Dario Compagno to talk about social media, and we had also contacted Julien Longhi initially for social media, but then he gave us a much more focused session on the visual component of recorded discourse interviews, forms of political discourse, which be his field in video recordings. We have looked again at the problems with totally different kinds of data, but we've looked again at the problems of data that are digital in the analysis of mediated interaction with Bert Meyer, who has focused on the problems of integrating quantitative and qualitative elements in the analysis, but also of compiling digital archives. Naomi Barron has taken us to the world of artificial intelligence and to what it has changed in our ways of writing, and therefore illustrated perhaps only very indirectly issues of transmediality, but certainly given us tools for the analysis of a lot of transmediality. The Thursday morning was very much focused on, I hope coherently focused on visual elements, from spatial discourse analysis to visual elements in multimodality in Elisabetta Adami's approach. An important element, I think, I haven't been able to follow everything, although sometimes you will have noticed that I was appearing in different workshops and sometimes even getting mixed up with where I was. Because you couldn't follow all the workshops, but I was trying to. and because I was very curious, I thought that it was the presentation of your own projects and the discussion of your own projects could be an important part of a summer school. And of course, we couldn't put you in a position to get feedback from many people. But we did try to offer that opportunity. And again, I personally think that that's been a most rewarding experience for me. And I must say honestly that I kept thinking, oh, I could invite this one next year to say something to my students, because there's so much that you've contributed to the work this week. So I have certainly learned a lot from our invited speakers, and I certainly learned a lot from you. And there would be thousands of things that we could still discuss, but I'd like to open a final round to hear from you, either what you would still like to discuss or issues that you think haven't been brought up to appropriately enough, etc., but also to hear from what you've appreciated, what you haven't appreciated, what you think makes it an experience that should be repeated, and what other things you might suggest should be changed. Again, send me a personal email if you prefer. There's not much point with a group like this, including both here and there, in doing an anonymous questionnaire at the end. But do give me feedback and do provide any comment on what you thought and what your reaction to the whole week is at the moment before we close. Anyone to start? I'm not rounding up much more than this. It's called final discussion and feedback. I'll start doing like in class. Da, 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 da. Here you go. Any comment? Good. Well, perhaps you could come to the front so that people, so that we get to know.
Okay. Not sure where the camera is. That one? Yes. No, it's okay. Okay, so for me, it was the first time here with so many subjects and everything. And I have been extremely happy. I'm of the idea that learning new things about things that maybe I don't know. And in this case, there were lots of subjects. So it's always positive because I can always learn things in different subjects that might be useful for my subjects too. So I think that was the most positive part somehow. As for me, obviously, being in presence would have been better. But being like this also in a mixed way is also useful because obviously who cannot be present can participate anyway, even though they are in different places in the world. So that is definitely positive. But being in present would have been better also maybe for organization matters. So maybe we would have had materials a little bit earlier. I think that was the worst thing for me because it was really hard to read everything that the people posted on Dolly and those kind of things. It was hard to focus on each subject because there are so many. So I think that was maybe the negative part of it because I couldn't focus perfectly in every single subject. And maybe I lost some little things that I couldn't be as, I couldn't learn effectively as I would have wanted to. So I think maybe if I had materials a little bit earlier, that would have been slightly better. But beside that, for me, it was a great experience. I'm really happy. Okay.
Couldn't agree with you more because in most cases I didn't have the time to go through the materials. So perhaps because I think that the speakers were very generous with their materials, they offered a lot of stimuli and it was probably a bit difficult to catch up with everything in a couple of weeks. We would have needed a month perhaps. But we had insisted on the idea that it was important to create a bit more interaction because that's always a bit frustrating otherwise in online events, especially at the end of the year when you've had so many online events. And so certainly, yes, we should have chased the speakers to give us the materials earlier. Anything else? Any other comment? There you go.
Hi, everyone. Well, first, thank you. It's really nice to be here in presence. It's the first conference or PhD activity where I get to meet new people. So that's also very important. I think most of the positives we have touched upon. It's been really useful in getting to know what's going on also in the area, in the geographical area, so we can communicate between each other. One thing that I was thinking is that perhaps this is a biased perspective because I very much feel like I am in this very interdisciplinary space where I consider myself more of a digital humanist, but I'm in a computer science department. But I was thinking that having a sort of session where we talk about the ethical digital humanist could be very useful, because I think in the digital humanities spaces where I've been, there's always the desire to have ethics in the research projects, but there's not that many tools. And I think that could be very interesting, especially for digital humanities context, because I think that increasingly we DHers will find ourselves as bridges between the humanities and computer science. And I think having the tools to explain and to teach ourselves to, for example, computer scientists, that we can't just flatten human experience is important, as well as teaching to humanists, I guess, what is possible, what is not possible with the methods. So I think it would be really great also, to have more guidance on how I can have an ethical project that uses tools that do flatten human experience, and how to do that and represent the data and represent the project in an ethical way.
Excellent point, and a suggestion for next year. I'll make a note of that. Any other homework for me from everyone? Any other suggestions for me? It's, or any other comments on issues that, well, you can have your own microphone.
Yes, so I know that I will regret this comment immediately because I'm in the organizational committee, but
self-criticism is accepted.
So the first year we prepared the summer school with a formula in which we had lectures and tutorials. This year was a little bit different. We had lectures and workshops. I would think that a way to have maybe a better experience of the summer school would be to include, besides the workshops that were very useful, I think, to receive feedback from your peers and from professors, besides the workshop, to include some kind of operational session. I don't know, some research project that you start and finish during the summer school. I know that maybe a week is not enough to do that. That's why I will regret this comment, because that will mean to do 2 weeks of summer school and not one. But I think that it would be really useful to have an operational session run by the invited speakers, small projects, small groups work together and to conclude something within the summer school.
That's a good point too, and I think it is in a way, well, it doesn't necessarily mean 2 weeks. It does mean having the materials online earlier, maybe just having one meeting of 1 hour, 10 days before the week. I think in a way, Louise Ravelli has given us a splendid example of how you can actually organize something like that. And I am very grateful, and I should also, well, when it really comes to a close, I will also have to thank you on the part of many people, and she bothered to write and thank me for the invitation and thank all of you for your contribution. And I thought, well, then we should start saying that we thank you. And we went on with thanks for 3 or 4 emails, but certainly she gave us an excellent example, because all she needed was to give you clear instructions at the beginning, one short session to make sure that everything was sorted out, and that was essential. And then you presented your own work. If this could be done at greater length with different tools. So for example, one could have a series of sessions that aim specifically at letting you acquire skills in some field. And those could all be organized like that, with pre-tasks, preliminary organizational session, and then a session with you doing the thing. There's different ways of doing this, I think, but that was a good example, and certainly something that we could pick up for the future and include both theoretical sessions, project presentation sessions, and actual workshops where you have a series of encounters, let's say, of different kinds. Yes, that's another very useful organizational thing. Anyone else wants to give me some homework for next year?
May I?
Sure, Marta, there you go.
It's not a suggestion, actually. I just wanted to make some consideration, because I like all the presentations and all the lectures, but what I liked the most was the fact that we were given the chance of presenting our project, our research project, because I studied PhD in 2019-2020 academic year. And I remember the first month when we could meet each other in person, that even though our PhD is so multidisciplinary and we were an heterogeneous group, we were often giving feedbacks each other on our own researches, and that's what I missed during this pandemic period. So having the chance of presenting our projects and getting feedbacks from both lecturers, but also from other students with other backgrounds was what I liked the most, actually. And I wanted to say so.
Good, thank you very much, Marta. Thank you. So that's an important part of, and of course there's different ways of managing that too. For example, in our first edition, we had some presentations and some posters so that we could do everything in one day. But it is I think an important element, again, particularly at times when there's no there's very little opportunities to exchange views informally, then you have to set up this kind of exchange of views. Yes?
Okay. Well, I wanted to stress what Marta suggested, the fact that not only the lectures were useful, but also the workshops. So in my personal case, I learned something from both the workshop, from a methodological perspective, but also from a lecture, from a theoretical perspective in my case. And also the structure of the workshops allowed to listen the questions which were addressed to other presenters, to other PhD students, which still gives a suggestion on how to approach methodologically to something which you could have not realized in your own project.
Okay, thank you very much, Federico. That's another important comment. Anyone else who wants to share views or wants to say, well, don't forget to send me an email with all the comments that you didn't want to share publicly, but otherwise.
If I may say something also.
Sure.
I mean, it's not a very clever comment. And first of all, I'm very grateful that I could meet all of you, even if it's through the screen, you know. But I liked very much when we had sessions that were split up in 2 days, for example, right? So, for example, this session with Professor Rabelli, in which, in a way, you can get a little bit of the thing that you are just focusing on, and then in another day, you have had the time to process a bit more that information, and you actually, or at least in my case, I have this feeling that I can more critically analyze what we are working on. So I know it's very difficult, and it's also, yeah, the timetable is very difficult to make, but I think that would be also very, very interesting for future editions if some of the talks, because the topics are very heterogeneous, could be kind of split into two or in a different way.
True, very good point, especially in these times where we should have thought about it more, because it was an excellent way of organizing things. Now, of course, not everyone is as generous as Louise Ravelli, because she was with us on 3 separate days because of the timing, because she was with us in the evening. Someone else has also been with us in the evening, Arandi, who has spent the evenings with us. She's from New Zealand. But yeah.
So, Professor Marina, so thank you very much for having me in your workshop. And first of all, I'd like to say that, I mean, this was like a really great opportunity to be able to take part in the workshop. So something, if I may, I just have one suggestion. I was wondering, when I was looking at all the workshops that were organized, I sometimes wish that I could have been in some of the workshops that ran parallel. If I could have listened to some of my colleagues talk about their projects, maybe I thought I could have learned from what they were talking about and discussing as well. So if that is by any way practically possible, that I think would have enriched our experience even more. But it was overall like a really great experience for me. So thank you for having me in the program.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for participating even at these very unsocial hours for you. But certainly, yes, I thought too, having tried to follow even as I admitted, workshops that were running at the same time. I kept sort of bouncing here and there. I had my iPad in one of the workshops and my computer in the other so that I could follow. And sometimes I realized as I was listening to you, oh no, I should have put these two together because that would have worked better. But then having a look at your CVs, listening to your wishes for I'd like to be in this workshop or in the other, in the end you never you never have the full picture, and when you listen to the presentation you say, oh no, these two should have been together. Perhaps even creating some sort of social involvement of some kind would have been useful, but there again, we thought at the beginning of having coffee breaks with some kind of socializing activity, but then sometimes people want to move away from the screen, if not just to sort of go to your kitchen to have your coffee instead of sitting at your so we dropped that. We thought of that, but we dropped it. Yes, but I think that those are very good suggestions. Any other comment? Well, perhaps half a hand, no, a finger. Well, perhaps I'll just report then that I've had messages from many of the lecturers saying that they had enjoyed that enormously. Elisabetta Dami yesterday sent me a letter about this size, saying how she had enjoyed the participation yesterday, and that she wanted to thank me and thank all of you, and if I could possibly report this. And then a lot of people have actually sent a word of thank you. So perhaps we can come round to the ending in time this time, by saying that on the part of all of the speakers, almost all of the speakers, I should thank the students for participating. I should certainly thank all the speakers for the contributions they've given. I can thank too directly, but I'm certainly grateful to all of you. All the speakers, because you've all been speakers at this conference, at this workshop. So I thank all the speakers. I thank all the participants. I certainly thank all the organizers, particularly those who have worked a lot, like this one. But all the other, who else is there? There's Federico, because some of the names perhaps you've, there's Jessica, there's Rosiana, who were in the organizing committee together with Leonardo. Have I forgotten anyone else here? There's online, Claudia Cagninelli, there's Manfredi Scanagatta, who's already there, and there's Giuliana Diani, who's there online. There was Elisabetta Minetti, who was here in the first part of the morning, part of the organizing committee. And there's, of course, the whole of the scientific committee, which includes some of these names plus others. I won't list all the names, but perhaps, yes, it would be nice if people turn their cameras on and someone here kindly took a picture of the people if they turn their cameras on, so that we won't be able to take like the picture in the garden. We'll try, or something like that, as at the end of some conferences, but at least we'll get a screen and then you'll get the room. All together, I think, is a bit like what in Italy we call an assembramento. So I'm not asking everyone to come up here, but it would be nice to have a picture of, no idea? Like this. Well, let's see if it works. Otherwise, just a silly idea of the Zoomers, and perhaps a picture of the participants from here, Jessica, and we'll, or perhaps I should take it with you in it. Okay. And now everyone's got to turn round though. We apologize for this complication, but we want to, so we're all together in the picture. And once again, let me thank you very much for everything you've contributed to this week. Some of us will go off for lunch together so that you on Zoom will miss this part of the week, but I hope you'll enjoy the afternoon, and I hope you'll send me news about your own reactions to the conference. Bye. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.